You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with the Brian Flores lawsuit. And make no mistake about it, the NFL does not like this. Alright, I understand that all it takes is about $200 in a dream to file a lawsuit, but this is pretty damning. Some of the things that are in this lawsuit are really, really disgusting. You know, the NFL should consider themselves really lucky that this lawsuit was filed the week of the Pro Bowl. If this had been filed the week of the Super Bowl, that's all people would have been talking about leading up to the big game. Radio Row would have gone nuts with it. That's about the only good thing for the NFL in this scenario. Now, the lawsuit itself is worth reading. It's very hard to read. It's written in legalese. It's a 58-page lawsuit. I am not going to go through all 58 pages, okay? That is not going to happen. Instead, the best way to break down this lawsuit is to go over the main points. And J. Brady McCullough of the Los Angeles Times did a great job of outlining the main points. I'll go through the 7 points now. The first one is something that I've spoken about in the past. The fact that the NFL is a majority black league, and they currently only have one head coach that's black, only 4 black offensive coordinators, only 11 black defensive coordinators, only 6 black GMs, no black owners. In the 20 years since the Rooney Rule was passed, there have been about 130 head coaching vacancies. Only 15 of those were filled by black men. That's about 11% of all vacancies being filled by black men. That's not good, okay? And that is something that I've spoken about. The majority of NFL players are black, 70%. In order to properly represent the league, there should be more black coaches. I mean, the lawsuit brings up a great point in breaking down why black coaches have been mistreated. If they're lucky enough to get a job, the lawsuit breaks down why some of them were mistreated. Think about a guy like Jim Caldwell. Caldwell had 2 double-digit win seasons for the Colts. Peyton Manning's out for the year in 2011. They stumbled to a 2-14 record. I don't want to say that's a forgivable performance, but if ever there was a good excuse to go 2-14, losing Peyton Manning is that reason. So, I can understand people pointing to that and saying Caldwell was mistreated. And the lawsuit gets on the Lions for firing him after 4 7-win seasons, 3 9-win seasons. I mean, the thing I'll say there is, you think back to those Lions teams, did Jim Caldwell ever really elevate them? What's the mark of a great head coach? The mark of a great head coach is to get his team to play above expectations. Zach Taylor is a great head coach. Why? Because no one thought the Bengals would be in the Super Bowl. Caldwell was with the Lions for 4 years. They never won a playoff game. They only made the playoffs twice. I mean, it's a fair point that Caldwell may have been mistreated with the Colts. Would you have liked him to get a shot with Andrew Luck? Yeah. It's okay to be upset at that. But the Lions thing, come on, he never really elevated them. He didn't do a bad job with them or anything. But no one was going to mistake him for Wayne Fontes anytime soon. Good argument, but it gets a little wishy-washy once you bring up the Lions. The double standard treatment of Steve Wilks. Wilks went 3-13 in his 1 year with the Cardinals. But the lawsuit claims that really wasn't his fault. It was his first season, which is true. There's no way around that. Wasn't given any time to develop anything. He had a rookie quarterback in Josh Rosen. Steve Keim had the DUI suspension. It was not a good season in the desert. So Wilks is made out to be the scapegoat. He gets fired. The Cardinals throw a ton of money at Cliff Kingsbury. It's a surprising move. And look, it's up to you to decide whether or not it's worked. Kingsbury's first year, he went 5-10-1. Again, if the goal is to win games, 5-10-1 isn't much better than 3-13. Okay, fine, it's 2.5 games better, but you still finished with double-digit losses. And certainly Cliff Kingsbury hasn't set the world on fire. I've been critical of him in the past, but context here is important. What was Steve Wilks' job in 2018? To develop Josh Rosen. If Josh Rosen looked like the second coming of Kurt Warner, there's no way he would have been fired. Instead, Rosen had a disastrous rookie season, completed just over 55% of his passes for just under 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. That's what opened the door for Kyler Murray. If Rosen had balled out his rookie season and played like I thought he would, Kyler Murray is not a Cardinal. Cliff Kingsbury is not a Cardinal. So we're just gonna excuse Wilks for not developing Josh Rosen? You want to tell me he's a defensive guy? That's not his job? No. He's the head coach. Alright, the buck stops with him. And also, think back. That was a weird hire at the time. Like, Wilks only had 1 year as a defensive coordinator in the NFL to his name. The Panthers' defense that year was really good, not great. But Wilks parlays it into a head coaching job. It was kinda predictable that he'd struggle. Should he have gotten a second year? Yeah, probably. I don't like it when coaches are fired after 1 year, but I think it's safe to say it's worked out for the Cardinals. They were in the playoffs last year. Kyler Murray's a franchise quarterback. Josh Rosen's going to be lucky to be a backup next year. Maybe it's not the fairest thing in the world, but look, the Cardinals ended up getting it right. They're in a better place now than they would have been if they had kept Steve Wilks. I mean, if Wilks stays, Nick Bosa probably goes to the Cardinals. Which wouldn't have been a bad thing, but you're still without the quarterback. God knows who the quarterback of the Cardinals would be right now if they didn't draft Kyler Murray. It wouldn't be Josh Rosen, I'll tell you that. I wish it would have been. Would have made me look a lot smarter for going to bat for him the way I did before he was drafted. But, hey, I got it wrong. It wasn't the first time, and it definitely won't be the last time. The lawsuit brings up David Culley. There is no question that David Culley should not have been fired after this season. It was ridiculously unfair. I criticized Nick Caserio for it. I cannot defend that decision. The only thing I'll say is, and I said this when he was hired, you had to know that David Culley wouldn't be the guy to lead the Texans to a Super Bowl. So if you can get a clear-cut upgrade, I have no issue with that. The thing is, though, Brian Flores was that clear-cut upgrade. If the Texans had hired Flores, there would have been no issues whatsoever. It would have made perfect sense. Caserio could have said in the introductory press conference, I like David, have a lot of respect for him, I'm thankful for what he did here, but when the opportunity arose to get Brian Flores, someone who I've known for years, someone who I trust a great deal, someone who's proven that he's a really good coach in this league, I had to do right by this franchise and their fans and bring him in. No one would have had any issue with that. But now Brian Flores isn't going to get another job in the NFL. You can't sue the NFL if you're an unemployed coach and get hired again. This guy couldn't be hired to be ball boy right now. I mean, he said in the lawsuit he knows the risk. He's willing to take it. Okay. You're allowed to do that. If you want to blow up all the bridges that you've built and you want to salt the earth and say, I never want to work in the NFL again, you can do that. I just don't think it's smart. I mean, look, he's a grown man. He's 40 years old. He's going to be 41 later this month. He's certainly capable of making his own decisions, but can we just agree it's probably not wise of him to have done this? What's the realistic best case scenario here? The NFL settles, they throw some money Flores' way, and he shuts up? For something like the NFL, a settlement is not an admission of guilt. The NFL brings in billions of dollars. So they can just throw a little bit of money at Brian Flores. It'll keep him happy. It'll keep his family happy. Meanwhile, the NFL will make that up in a second. The worst case scenario is he gets nothing. And he burned all those bridges for nothing. I mean, you may think that Brian Flores would be a very highly sought after college coach. I don't know if I'd want to hire him if I was an AD. This guy just sued his former employer. I understand the argument of, okay, I just won't give him a reason to sue me, but at the same time, you need to think to yourself, what's to stop him from making something up? I'm not saying that Flores made this up, but this lawsuit is a lot of conjecture and a lot of assumptions that I'm not sure are true or not. I think Brian Flores' coaching days are over. If he's okay with that, fine. God bless him. But I sincerely hope he has the means to support his family when he's burned the only employment he's ever known since 2004. The lawsuit then brings up some long-time black assistants that have never gotten a head coaching opportunity. Guys like Chris Richard and Terrell Austin and Eric Bieniemy. You know, at the end of the day, I can point to long-time white assistants that haven't gotten a coaching opportunity. I understand it's a lot more obvious with someone like Bieniemy. And Bieniemy should be a head coach right now. I don't think there's any question about that. But having said that, I could make that same argument for someone like Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen has been in the NFL non-stop since 2003. Did some really good things for the Raiders, did some really good things for the Jaguars. I can make the argument he deserves a head coaching chance. He didn't even get an interview this cycle. I don't know if he's ever gotten an interview. I mean, the thing is, people like Richard and Austin, when they didn't get the head coaching jobs they interviewed for, I don't think anyone was left scratching their heads like why they didn't get hired. You may have thought they were deserving candidates, but there are a lot of deserving candidates in the NFL. Bieniemy, you're left scratching your head. There's no question. Alright, God only knows why this guy hasn't gotten a chance to be a head coach yet. But you can make that same argument for a guy like Greg Olsen. Bieniemy's a better candidate, I'll grant you that. But I can make a very strong argument that Greg Olsen should be a head coach also. I'll say this. I'd have rather had him than David Culley. I don't think there's a question about that. Now, the best part of this whole lawsuit is how Flores came to the decision to file this suit. On January 24th, at 2:30 p.m., Flores received a text message from Bill Belichick congratulating Brian on getting the Giants' head coaching job. There's just one problem. Belichick thought he was texting Brian Daboll. not Brian Flores. So, okay, it's an honest mistake. What's the issue here? Brian Flores interviewed with the Giants on January 27th, 3 days after that text. Brian Daboll wasn't officially hired until January 28th. Okay, that's an issue. Brian Flores has every right to be upset that he walked into that interview with Joe Schoen, knowing that he never had a chance to get that job. Okay, I think we've all had interviews for jobs that we've really wanted. Some more than others, but think about it this way. If you interview for a job that you really want and it's close to home and the pay is good and it provides an opportunity for growth, the benefits are good, it's a company that you've wanted to work for years, whatever the reason is, to find out later that you never had a chance to get that job, you'd be ticked off. So for Brian Flores to walk into that interview on January 27th, knowing that he didn't have a chance at that job, I give Flores credit, because I would have canceled the interview. Okay, Brian Flores was just a Rooney Rule checkoff at that point. And he has every right to be upset about that. If you're going to interview for a job, the least the company that you're interviewing with can do is treat you as a legitimate candidate. The only way that that's not acceptable is if someone got the interview via nepotism or the spoil system, and it's clear they're not a good candidate. It's clear that the fit just won't work. Then you conduct the interview to make whatever family member he has happy, but you can then say, this guy is a superior candidate, I'm not going to hire your relative. At the end of the day, no one should get upset about that. But look, that's not what happened here. Brian Flores should have been treated as a legitimate candidate for that job. The thing is, though, don't make it sound like he should have been gifted this job, okay? I don't care what anyone says. When the Giants hired Joe Schoen, it was clear as day that Brian Daboll was going to be the next head coach. Why? Because Schoen and Daboll know each other. Why is that not an issue? Because it is perfectly okay for the GM to hire someone who he's familiar with, who just so happens to be eminently qualified to be a head coach. For a while, you got the sense that the Giants' job was a two-man race between the Bryans, Daboll and Flores. When Schoen got the job, you had to know that Daboll would become the next head coach of the Giants. And if you didn't realize that, shame on you. Okay? Then you can't see the writing on the wall. To begrudge Joe Schoen for hiring someone who he knows, who he trusts, and who is very qualified to be the next head coach of the Giants is sickening. Because in essence, you're accusing him of being a racist. Okay? The lawsuit says that Flores was treated as a box to check off due to his race. But the reason that you weren't hired isn't because you're black. The reason you weren't hired is because Shane and Dabo have this pre-existing relationship and you don't. I mean, here's a newsflash, Bright Light. You were the presumptive favorite to be the next head coach of the Texans. Why? Because you worked with Nick Caserio for so long. Now, is Flores told that he's not going to get that job? Maybe, but I certainly thought that Flores was the odds-on favorite. When he conducted that second interview, I thought, okay, he's going to get the job very soon. Did Flores find out that that's not going to happen? Possibly. But would anyone have begrudged the Texans for hiring Flores? Would anyone have criticized Nick Caserio for hiring Flores? No. Would anyone have screamed nepotism? Would anyone have screamed spoil system? No. It's just absolutely absurd to drag the Giants through the mud like this. And I hate the Giants. But to vilify them for hiring Brian Daboll? Come on. That's just dumb. I'll say this, though. Flores has a right to be upset that he was subjected to a sham interview. There's no question about that. And a lot of black head coaches have been subjected to that. I mean, there are some cases when you're starting your head coach search that you have a guy in mind before you really start. Like the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh McDaniels was gifted that job. He wouldn't even interview for it unless he knew he was getting the job. He was given that job on a silver platter. So guys like Todd Bowles and Gerard Mayo, the two black candidates that the Raiders had to interview because of the Rooney Rule, have every right to be upset. The Raiders only interviewed 4 people. Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach, who they kind of had to interview because he led them to the playoffs. Todd Bowles, who they had to interview to satisfy the Rooney Rule. Gerard Mayo, same thing. And Josh McDaniels, who walked into that interview knowing that he would get the job. Alright, think about it this way. If you're Bowles or if you're Mayo, you're preparing for this interview, you're studying for it, you're thinking of ways to make yourself the best candidate possible. Then you find out later you never had a chance at it. If I'm Bowles, I'm furious. If I'm Mayo, I'm furious. Like, is that all I was to you? Just a token black? I never had a chance to get this job? I was just brought in so you wouldn't get fined or you wouldn't lose draft picks, whatever the punishment for the Rooney Rule is, I actually don't know. Those guys have every right to be furious. Brian Flores has a right to be furious. But again, it's okay to conduct your head coaching search with a preferred candidate in mind. I mean, I guess my biggest issue here is with the Raiders. The only people that you interviewed were people that you had to interview. You had to interview Bisaccia because he got you to the playoffs. You had to interview Bowles because he's black. You had to interview Mayo because he's black. You cast a very, very narrow net. When you're conducting a head coaching search, you want to conduct an extensive one. Again, it's okay to have a specific candidate in mind, but maybe there's someone else who comes out of nowhere and really impresses you. Joe Douglas had no history with Robert Saleh. Why did Saleh get the Jets' job? Because he really impressed the Jets' hierarchy. That's great. That's fantastic. The Jets cast a wide net and they ended up getting their guy. A guy who Joe Douglas had no previous experience with, but someone who wowed the Jets during his interview with them. And now every Jets fan knows the phrase, all gas, no brake. And look, even if you cast that wide net, it's okay to circle back to your preferred candidate. You can just say, I wanted to cast a wide net. I wanted to hear what other people had to say. But you were always my guy. The job is yours. You know, at the end of the day, the person who's leading the head coaching search isn't doing their job if they're just focused on one person. That's it. Having the horse blinders on doesn't work. And people like Brian Flores, Todd Bowles, and Gerard Mayo have every right to be upset at teams that do that. I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but that's okay. In the lawsuit, Flores alleges that the Broncos also subjected him to a sham interview. Alright, at the end of the day, it's safe to say that the interview with the Giants was a sham. He interviewed, and everyone there knew he wasn't going to get the job. That's the definition of a sham interview. I have no issue with the Giants doing that. If they need to stay compliant with the Rooney Rule, okay, that's going to happen. I mean, the Rooney Rule needs to be amended. I don't know how it can be done. I don't know what more the NFL can do. It's not like they can call up a team and say, you must hire a black candidate. I just don't know what can be done. The Rooney Rule doesn't work. I just don't know what can be done to fix it. That's the thing. But again, Flores has a right to be upset that he had to go through that. It doesn't make the Giants racist. It doesn't make Joe Shane racist. It just means that Bill Belichick needs to get a tongue lashing. Here's my question. How did Belichick find out that Brian Daboll was going to get that job? Did Brian Daboll and Bill Belichick share the same agent? How did that news get to Bill Belichick? What connection does Bill Belichick have to the New York Giants? You haven't been with the Giants in 30 years. I mean, I understand that he's Bill Belichick, and he could probably find out anything he wanted to, but wow, that is bizarre. But interestingly, this wasn't the first sham interview that Flores went through. He said that when he interviewed with the Broncos in 2019, their GM at the time, John Elway, and their president and CEO, Joe Ellis, arrived an hour late to the interview. They were drunk, and it was clear to Flores that he was just being interviewed to satisfy the Rooney Rule. The Broncos have vehemently denied that allegation. Ultimately, that's going to be really hard to prove. Unless there's video somewhere of something pertaining to this situation, that's an allegation that can't be proven, but it also can't be disproven. Now, there's one other point that I need to hit on. In the lawsuit, Flores alleges that Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, offered to pay him $100,000 for each game that he lost in 2019. That was the tank for Tua year. It was heavily rumored that the Dolphins were tanking that season. They coveted Tua. They ended up surprising a lot of people by going 5-11. Instead of the first overall pick, they got the 5th overall pick. They still got Tua, but interestingly enough, and this isn't in the lawsuit, the Dolphins could have had Joe Burrow. In fact, according to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, and this came out on the 30th, the Dolphins talked to the Bengals about trading up to the first overall spot so they could take Burrow. The Bengals never seriously entertained the Dolphins' offer, but according to Florio, the offer was the 5th overall pick, the 18th overall pick, and the 26th overall pick, which the Dolphins had anyway, and more. We'll never know what the and more was because the Bengals didn't listen. Can you really blame them? They're in the Super Bowl. The Dolphins aren't. It's kind of interesting, though. If the Dolphins had tanked and they had ended up with the first overall pick, they'd be in a better spot now than they're actually in. I mean, how good would the Dolphins be with Burrow? Tough to say precisely. They'd certainly be better. Would they be in the Super Bowl? We'll never know, but you can't disprove it. I mean, at the end of the day, the Dolphins got the guy that they coveted. They coveted Tua. Everyone knew it. And I like Tua. I really do. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league. Maybe not great, but good. Needs to stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. So look, at the end of the day, I guess it worked out for the Dolphins. They have a guy who has the potential to be a franchise quarterback. He's not there yet. Burrow is. That's the thing. I mean, the Dolphins would be better off with Burrow, but they're not in a bad spot now. I guess that's the main point here. But what's interesting is the notion that Ross offered to pay Flores money to lose games. Okay, if I was a Dolphins fan and I spent money on tickets, and I knew that the powers that be wanted to lose those games, I'd be furious. I'd sell my tickets. I mean, let me tell you, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but if this allegation is proven, Stephen Ross may be looking at a lawsuit. Stephen Ross may be looking at punishment from the NFL. The Dolphins may get hit with fines and loss of draft picks that would put the Patriots to shame. I mean, we know that some teams go into the year with the expectation of not making the playoffs and just letting their young players develop, and you let the chips fall where they may, and you'll end up with a high pick. But for an owner to offer to pay the head coach $100,000 per loss is sickening. It is disgraceful. And if it is true, Stephen Ross should be banned from the NFL. Look, in the NFL, you're only going to have so many teams that contend for a playoff spot. There are going to be teams that sink to the bottom. Or there are going to be teams that just have a bad offseason, and when training camp hits, you look at the roster, and it's just clear as day that they're not going to do anything special. No one is saying that every team, every year, needs to go all out to contend. Maybe that's what would happen in an ideal world, but that just doesn't happen. That's not the nature of the NFL. I mean, think about it. If the Jets pulled off 1 million trades to try to get better, great, fantastic, but if they got great players from other teams, those teams just got worse. So not every team is going to be good every year. That's just not how it works. Now, I don't like tanking in the NFL. I don't think it works. You can make the argument that the Jets have tanked for the past decade. Where's it gotten them? I mean, when the Giants benched Eli Manning for Daniel Jones, that was throwing away that season. Where's it gotten them? And I think it's important to make the distinction between tanking and having a developmental season for your young players. Did the Jets really tank this year? I don't think they went into this year with the expectation of losing every game. Did they go into the season expecting to win every game? No. Last year was all about the development of Zach Wilson. Letting Wilson take his rookie lumps and letting him grow into a better quarterback, which I think you saw at the end of the season. But I don't think Robert Saleh went into those games expecting to lose. I don't think Joe Douglas went into those games expecting to lose. Did they do enough to field a competitive roster? No, but I don't think that's tanking. There were only so many great players in the NFL, and you're not going to get all of them. You know, even in free agency, I can say that the Jets should sign J.C. Jackson and Marcus Williams and Devontae Adams and Dalton Schultz. Are they going to get all those guys? Probably not. I think tanking is when you make a concerted effort to lose as many games as possible. You go out of your way to lose. Have the Jets had years where they've done that? You can make that argument. Just to bring it full circle, have the Giants had years where they've done that? I mean, taking Daniel Jones over Josh Allen, the linebacker, probably wasn't the right move if you wanted to win games. But neither Woody Johnson nor John Mara ever offered to pay their head coach $100,000 to intentionally lose games. That is insane. That takes tanking to a whole new level. That is wrong. Even if you're a supporter of tanking, even if you think it's acceptable, you have to admit that's wrong. And again, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm furious. I spent money to go to these games. I watched these games. Give me my money back. No fan is going to spend their hard-earned money or waste their time watching a team with the stated intention of losing. Even if you think your team is going to lose. Like when I went to the Jets-Bengals game that Mike White started. I thought the Jets were going to lose that game. There's still that sliver of doubt that maybe, just maybe, the Jets will win. You know what? The Jets won that game. That's what makes sports great. But when you are actively advocating for your team to lose, especially before the season starts, as the owner, that is 100% wrong. And if that is proven, Stephen Ross should be banned from the NFL. The Dolphins should be fined. They should be stripped of all their picks. They should give their fans their money back. That is sickening, if that is true. I don't know how you're going to prove it. Unless you have something like that in writing, or if there's videos somewhere. But if it's true, shame on Stephen Ross. Look, all in all, this lawsuit probably isn't gonna amount to much. It's certainly not a good look for the NFL. In a perfect world, they wouldn't be dealing with this. Especially in the lead up to the Super Bowl. But all that's going to happen as a result of this lawsuit, barring some jaw-dropping bombshell, is the NFL will probably throw some money at Flores to make him go away, to make him shut up. The NFL can spin it as, hey, we're a $1 billion company. We didn't want to subject our owners to this embarrassment. We have the financial flexibility to settle and it won't hurt our bottom line. So that's what we decided to do here. The real question is, what does Brian Flores get out of this? Okay, maybe he gets some money, but is that enough to provide for him and his family for the next however many years? I don't know. Like, if the goal here is to end racism in the NFL, firstly, I don't think the NFL is racist. Okay, I think there is an issue with the number of black coaches and the number of black GMs and the number of black owners. I think that's an issue. Does that make the NFL racist? No. Firstly, we just saw some black GMs hired this cycle in Ryan Poles and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. There was a rumor that the Jaguars were going to bring in Adrian Wilson and Byron Leftwich. I reported on that. Nothing's been made official with that. Makes me feel stupid, but what are you going to do? Mistakes happen. You know, the thing is, while a guy like Eric Bieniemy may be eminently qualified, or Brian Flores, or Terrell Austin, or Chris Richard, or someone like that, there are white coaches that are very qualified too. You want to tell me they're not as qualified? How do you quantify qualifications? Years in the league? Not all experience is good experience. If you were defensive coordinator for a terrible defense, that's not something you want to put on your resume. Look, at the end of the day, stupid teams make stupid decisions. At the end of the day, stupid owners make stupid decisions. Stupid GMs make stupid decisions. Eric Bieniemy should have a job right now, and I don't know why he doesn't. Does that make the NFL racist? Think about this cycle for a minute. There's only one great black candidate, Eric Bieniemy. Every other black candidate has issues. Todd Bowles failed miserably with the Jets. Jim Caldwell really never elevated his teams. Brian Flores is never going to work in the NFL again. Leslie Frazier did a terrible job with the Vikings. Byron Leftwich had Tom Brady to work with. Aaron Glenn has only been a defensive coordinator for 1 year. How much say does Gerard Mayo really have with the Patriots? The Bill Belichick coaching tree is not a good one. It's okay if you want to steer clear from that. Can Hines Ward get a little more experience before he becomes a head coach? Please? Same thing with Thomas Brown. D'Amico Ryans has only been a defensive coordinator for 1 year. Let's give him a little more experience, too. I know the Niners' defense was great this year, but can we give him more than 1 year as a defensive coordinator, please? Vance Joseph did a terrible job with the Broncos. Patrick Graham isn't a world beater. We think of Patrick Graham as some great defensive mind. He's been a defensive coordinator in the NFL for 3 seasons. The best record that he has been a part of as defensive coordinator is 6-10 with the 2020 Giants. Alright, does he really deserve to be a head coach? No. Even a guy like Raheem Morris didn't do a good job for the Buccaneers. And he didn't do a good job with the Falcons as their interim head coach. I mean, not for nothing, but Bieniemy has an issue too. The Chiefs' offense was not great this year. At least not by Mahomes standards. Did you watch the second half of the AFC title game? Look, Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach in this league. There is no question about that. And I don't know why he's only gotten 1 interview this cycle. I really don't. But he's not a perfect candidate. I understand that there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. I can poke a hole in Brian Dable. Josh Allen's great. I think it's safe to say he'll have another great year with Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator. Matt Eberflus, someone who I've liked for a long time. Colts didn't make the playoffs this year. You know, every candidate comes with some risk. Yes, Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach. There's no question. It defies logic that he's not. But the fact that he's not a head coach doesn't make the NFL racist. You know, I'm reminded of the Bob Dylan song, Blowin' in the Wind. Truthfully, Dylan doesn't even sing my favorite version of that song. Peter, Paul, and Mary do. That song asks a million questions. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Fantastic song. Basically, it means that those questions have no clear-cut answer. It's like the wind. It's unobtainable. What can be done to further black people in the NFL? We know that they're players, but that's not enough. We need more coaches, we need more coordinators, we need more GMs, and we need some owners. There's no question about that. I'm white, and I'm saying that. Representation is important. So how do we do that? How do we further black men, and women for that matter, but that's way, way, way down the line, in the NFL? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if there is one. This lawsuit isn't going to do it. Colin Kaepernick didn't do it. I'm not saying you don't fight for what's right. I'm just saying I don't know what this lawsuit is really gonna accomplish. Flores may get some money out of this, but realize his NFL career is over. Even if he said to Boston College, his alma mater, that he wanted to be involved in the program. If I'm the AD of the Eagles, Patrick Kraft, no relation to Robert, I'm thinking twice about that. Even if Brian Flores wanted to go to his prep school, Poly Prep, and said, hey, let me help you develop the next Isaiah Wilson, you've got to think that Poly would think twice about bringing him in. You can't sue your former employer and not face repercussions. Okay, that's just not how the world works. You want to tell me that's unfair? Here's a newsflash. Life is unfair. Even if Nick Caserio was this close to calling Brian Flores and saying, hey, come down to Houston, let's right this ship. He can't do that now. The owner would go nuts. I already have one headache with Deshaun Watson. I don't need another one. You know, this really may be penny smart, pound foolish. I understand that Flores is upset about his treatment as a black coach and the treatment of other black coaches. It's wrong, and there's no question about that. And he said that he's willing to fall on the sword to hopefully prompt some change. But I don't know what change is forthcoming. And realize, your one skill that you've exhibited since 2004 is being a really good football mind. I can't say great. You didn't win anything. You didn't win a playoff game as a head coach. You're a really good football mind. Now you don't have the ability to showcase that anymore. Unless you want to maybe latch on with a league like the XFL or the USFL. Even then, I don't know how those leagues feel about hiring you. or some other schmagegi league that's going to fold in 5 years? You can. You think you're prepared for the consequences. Are you? For your sake, I hope you are. I don't wish ill on Brian Flores. He's a grown man. He can do whatever he wants. But there is something to be said about promoting change from within. And realize, Brian Flores would have been a very highly sought-after candidate next year. You take a year off, you spend some time with your family, and then next year, every fan base wants you. Promote change from within. I just don't think you're gonna accomplish much with this. It's a noble goal. I don't think anyone can say it's not, but I just don't think this is gonna accomplish anything. I brought up the Jets a little earlier. Robert Saleh did something that he's never done as Jets head coach. He called out a player. Saleh said that when Mekhi Becton comes back, and he should be back next year, he'll need to beat out George Fant for the starting left tackle job. Becton was insane his rookie year. When the Jets drafted AVT, people were salivating over the left side of that O-line. That's in place for the next decade. Zach Wilson has nothing to worry about. Then Becton comes into training camp out of shape. His weight was a huge issue last year. On opening day, he suffered cartilage damage in his knee. It needed surgery. The initial timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. Then 4 to 6 weeks came and there was no update. Becton ended up missing the entire year. So it's fair to wonder, does this guy have the desire to succeed in the NFL? If you want to succeed in the NFL, you've got to stay in shape. And if and when you get hurt, you've got to work your tail off to come back from it. Becton didn't do that last year. Now Robert Saleh is publicly saying this guy may not be the starting left tackle next year. I mean, Saleh said that Becton could be the Jets' right tackle next year. But realize, Morgan Moses had a really good year last year. If the point is you want to keep Fant around because he was so good at left tackle, you got to keep Moses around too. I don't think Becton's starting job on the O-line in general is safe. And it brings up a lot of questions, but firstly, let me applaud Robert Saleh for this. Here's a guy who really doesn't yell and scream. Here's a guy who even last year, when the season was going as bad as it possibly could, refused to criticize anyone. He may be a fiery person on the sidelines, but he never directs that fire toward one of his players. And I think that's an issue. I think the best coaches have multiple arrows in their quiver. There are some players that you need to treat with kid gloves. There are some that you can't yell and scream at. It just doesn't work with them. But there are others who need that negative reinforcement. The best coaches know which method works for each of their players. Ideally, you don't need to criticize anyone to that extent, but look, it's a long season, everyone's human. Even the best players on earth make mistakes. There are going to be moments that you need to try to light a fire under someone. How do you do that? The kid gloves approach doesn't work for everyone. It works for some people, not everyone. It's okay if you want to project a calm demeanor when you're speaking to the media, but even then, there are moments when the fans want to see some fire. Like after you get blown out, say, yeah, I'm ticked off about this. They're a great team, but we're better than this, and we didn't act like it. That has been an issue with Saleh. The fact that he coddles his players so much. Him saying this, him publicly saying that Becton's going to need to earn his spot, good for him. I think everyone just took it for granted that Becton would be the starting left tackle next year. But for him to say no, Becton's going to need to earn it, great, fantastic. That's the right approach. Excellent job by Robert Saleh. It's a bad job by Joe Douglas, because it looks like this could be another wasted Jets first rounder. Another nail in the coffin of his 2020 draft class. But it's not fair to say that yet. You can get upset at Douglas. Certainly Tristan Wirfs at this very moment would have been the better pick. But I think everyone was fine with Becton last year. Give Becton a chance to right his ship. And if he doesn't, roll with Fant and Moses again. I have no problem with that. This is a great job by Robert Saleh. Bad look for Joe Douglas that Saleh needed to do this. Becton should have been motivated enough. He should have been able to come back, especially after being given a 4 to 8 week timeline. But at the end of the day, Becton can still salvage things. He had a lost season. It happens. Hopefully this wakes him up. I certainly think it can. And I think the ideal scenario is Becton being the starting left tackle next year. But he's going to need to earn it. And again, great job by Robert Saleh in vocalizing that publicly. I'll close this show out by talking about the Washington football team's new permanent name. The WFT is dead. Long live the Washington Commanders. That is official. They are now the Washington Commanders. You can take a look at their uniforms and their logos on Twitter. Their new Twitter name is @Commanders. Gotta wonder who they talked to at Twitter to get that. You gotta think @Commanders was taken already. Not @Commanders NFL, not @NFL Commanders, not @WAS Commanders, @Commanders. Good job by them. They kept the burgundy and gold, which they kind of had to. Obviously, they need a white uniform. That looks fine. I have no issue with it. They have an alternate black jersey, which I'm not crazy about. I just don't think it works with the gold. But I understand needing an alternate jersey. It's weird. Black and yellow work. The Pittsburgh Steelers pull it off. But this black and this gold, I don't like it. There's something about it that I just don't like. I will say this, though. I love the name Commanders. It's like Commander-in-Chief. Obviously, they brand themselves as being from DC, even though they technically play in Maryland. So they want to play off the Commander-in-Chief motif. I have no problem with that. I would have liked Washington Warriors. I like the alliteration. Washington Wombats would have been funny. But Commanders is fine. I have no issue with Washington Commanders. It's a lot better than Cleveland Guardians. I'll say that. The Guardians were named after statues on a bridge that no one knew anything about until the Cleveland Guardians became a thing. Everyone knows that the president is the Commander-in-Chief. So you want to play off that, that's fine. Washington Commanders. That's awesome. I really, really like that. I don't like their primary logo. It's just a W in some weird font. We couldn't do any better than that. You couldn't incorporate like a famous DC landmark or something. It's just kind of boring to me. And I guess it looks like a W, but the font is stupid. I don't like it. They have another logo. It's a circular logo. On the outer circle, it says Washington Football and their 5 titles. And there are 4 quadrants in the circle. You have the stupid W, you have established 19, then 32, and then 3 stars. I don't know what the 3 stars signify. Why 3? Past, present, and future? Faith, hope, and charity? Make it 5. At the time the Washington Commanders became a thing, they had 5 NFL titles. 37, 42, 83, 88, and 92. Technically, it was the 82, 87, and 91 seasons, but those Super Bowls took place in 83, 88, and 92. So that's where they're getting it from. I have no issue with that. Make it 5 stars. I don't understand why 3. And then Commanders in the middle, which is perfectly fine. And then there's kind of a boring Washington Commanders logo. It's plain Jane, but it works. You have the gold. Maybe you could have incorporated burgundy in it somehow, but whatever, it's fine. It's fine. I have no issue with it. And they have a new hashtag now, which is pretty cool. Hashtag Take Command. And they also have commanders.com. They did this right. Like, Washington had a long time to get this right. They had to change their name very quickly, so they were left with no choice but to run with the stupid Washington football team that was never going to stick. They got this right with Commanders. Are there things I would change? Yeah, but all in all, not much. At the end of the day, they got the name right. They got most of the jerseys right. I do like their secondary logos. I just want someone to explain the 3 stars to me. And the basic approach can work if you do it right, and I think the Commanders did it right. I'd like some burgundy in there, but if you want to run with gold, I have no problem with that. I don't know how it would look with, like, Washington being in burgundy and Commanders being in gold, or vice versa. It may not look good, I don't know. So, you want to keep it one color, I'm fine with that. I mean, job well done by Dan Snyder. They pulled this off. They didn't embarrass themselves with a stupid name. I think everyone can get behind the Commanders. And everyone should take command. Until tomorrow, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.